Oh, hogwash. Somebody found one time to me, looking up something, and they found, my Splunk presentation or something.
Yep.
It's like, I know that voice. Who is that? Well, it's my coworker.
Hey,
Wow.
Yeah.
small world.
So my name is Rob Mckennon. I've been with the LUG since the late '90s. I love Linux. I currently run Slackware on my home PC, and Dan has Slackware on his laptop right now, thanks to me. And seems to dual screen just fine. So I'm quite happy with it. Slackware does not run systemd either, so another reason to run Slack. And
Why do you hate systemd so much?
because it's just a pain in the butt.
Because it's buggy when they push out production.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it breaks
Different and ooey.
yeah. So anyway, yeah, I went from Red Hat 6 to Red Hat 7, or CentOS 6 to CentOS 7. And yeah, it breaks a lot of things. Yeah.
It does too many things at once.
Yeah, and
And
it has
then it
its
breaks all
hands
of
in
them at the same
everything, everything. Anyway, so Slackware's my distro of choice, and I work for a small banking industry here. I just started with them, herding cats. And, it's a lot of fun.
Is it herding cats or taming lions?
Herding cats. I assure you, it's herding cats. All right, so last month, POTS presented on installing a lamp stack, correct?
Yes.
Haphazardly so, yes.
Hazardly so, okay. So, what do you do after you install your lamp stack? All right, what do you do with this thing now you got everything installed?
Drink heavily because you have to support it now.
That is not what you said.
No, I said to actually just wait for the Perl script to start running out of the temp directory that says you're owned.
Travis's comment was stand by to get hacked.
Just wait until you see the Perl file running out of the temp directory. That's a good indicator.
So I said, all right, I'll run with that. Come on, mouse. Mouse. So no matter how good of a system admin you are, it's only a matter of time before you get that call.
Especially on a lamp stack.
Yep.
Can you just disable Perl?
It's the coordination
installing it,
between
yeah.
the developers and the system admins, all right, to make sure that when you get that call, that you're prepared. So, before you do anything else, create a backup plan. Before you start installing everything and getting everything fully configured, start backing it up early. Because that's one of the times that your lamp server is most vulnerable, is when you're getting it set up. And it has default stuff in there. Don't wait until, oh, I'm going to wait till the website's done, or I'm going to wait till the DB's configured. No. Create your backup plan first. What do you back up? Back up your website files, as in var, www, HTML or htdocs, whatever, and then your website directories. Back all those up. Back up your DB using a DB backup script, like MySQL dump. Back up all the configuration files. Any file that you change in Etsy, back it up. Etsy php.ini, your apache.httpd.conf file, back it up. And keep track of every file that you modify. Come on, mouse, work with me. Store your backup on a different server. So if you get hacked or unrooted, what are they going to do? They're going to be as mischievous as they can, and they're going to wipe out your system root. Or just change files at random.
Or if your hard drive crashes.
Or, yeah, or if your hard drive crashes. So what I do is I generate some SSH keys and use that user to transfer the file to a different system. So you can do this via cron script, so it does it every night. You can do it on command, whatever. But keep your backup files on a different server.
You should probably put the SSH keys to be a client. Or a server on that side, not a
Yeah,
client.
The backup server
Yes.
next to the...
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Hey, look, another server.
Yeah. So, here's an example of a backup script of the one that I'm currently using. And first I have it echoing, I run the script and I type in my DB password. And then that sends it to the MySQL dump command. There's a way to do this automatically using a .my.cnf file. I can't get that to work in Slackware for some reason. Supposedly it works great in Debian. I don't know, I didn't drill that far down into it.
Clear text passwords are a good thing anyway, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it might support like hashes.
MySQL dump, give your username and then the database that you want to back up. In my case, it's called Pong because this is for my ping pong database. Do a quick backup, don't lock your tables because I only have 2 tables I'm backing up. So anyway, and call it PongDB backup, append the date to it, .SQL. And then I'm going to run a tar command, tar cvzf, which is create, verbose, compress, and F is for file. And then the file name is PyBackup, appended by a date and TGZ. And these are the files that I'm backing up. The SQL file that I just did here, httpd.conf. I got a etcphp.ini file, my vhost.conf file, and then I SCP it to my other machine. Piece of cake. That's an example. I would take that example and run with it. Whatever other files that you change, put them in there. Any questions so far?
So the last line, SCP, stands for what?
Secure copy.
Secure copy.
Secure copy. It's like SSH, except it's
For copy.
it's for copying files from one to another, one machine to another.
Probably set up a SSH crash presentation sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah. So, as Pot's set up, you've installed Apache, and you want to make sure first Apache is running, so you can PS it, ps-e pipegrep httpd. That'll tell you if your HTTP daemon is running. You should see about 4 or 5 of them, or maybe 10, it depends on how your server's configured.
Or it'll be Apache too, if you're not,
Or it could be Apache too,
if you're Debian based.
if you're dev based, all right. And start it up if it's not running. Systemctl httpd to start. Is that correct or is that backwards?
I think it's starting in the service.
I knew I'd get that wrong.
Yeah, I would say that too. HTTPD isn't a function.
Yeah, I know.
I always think of it as, because I think with
It used to be the other way around.
right, the other way, you had more options than start, stop, and restart. You
Yeah.
could have more functions. But if you do it this way, the way I think of it is if this way, then it would be HTTP and then a function of that. But it's not anymore. So now it's systemctl, a generic list of 5 things: start, stop, status, restart,
And then what you want to do.
and then what you want to do on. So there's no like graceful dash restart, which Apache does to like not kill active web, people browsing the site. There used to be a thing when it was the other method, which I've forgotten at this point.
Yeah, me too. Service.
Services.
Yeah.
Graceful dash restart.
Yeah.
Apache, and it was Nia.
Or
So,
Apache code.
Test Apache is running by putting your IP address in the server or in a web browser, and hopefully you'll see something that says it works. If you go to lots of IP addresses, you'll see it works, which means they configured their Apache server, but it's not really doing anything yet.
And then you go to slash status and see what Or that.
So, now that you've tested Apache and it works, now we're going to test PHP. So you create a phpinfo.php file. You put those 3 lines of code in there. Then you open up your browser again and go to your IP address /phpinfo.php, and it should print out a really cool 2 or 3 pages of PHP information about your system.
Pro tip, do not leave that on production.
Yeah.
Delete that after you're done.
Why?
Let's make sure that PHP and Apache are
I'm
working
going to go to
together.
an L5 that'll get me a shell.
PHP security tip.
Hey, there you go.
Remove that file.
There we go.
Beautiful.
Because that tells you a lot about your system that nobody else needs to know.
Mhm.
Also, the fact that it echoes out variables.
Yeah.
Bad.
Minor technicality.
As a quick sidebar, the on one of those test VMs that we did last month, it had the I think it was test.php was the file, and I saw a number of requests going to that particular file. So
So, yeah,
but at the end got deleted,
test it,
burnt.
make sure it works, that you're working together.
Never call your test script test.php.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody knows that's where buggy code is.
Or index 1.
So now that you got Apache working, now we want to configure Apache for virtual hosting. So when somebody goes to www.pong.com, let's just say, all right, and it resolves that to your IP address. It sends a request to your IP address, hey, I want to see pong.com. Now, your Apache server is going to get that request and not just send you to the default page, it's going to send you to the virtual server for pong.com. You have to tell Apache, configure Apache for those virtual hosts. You can have, I don't know, is it actually unlimited, the number of hosts you can have?
I'm not aware of
Uh,
I'm not aware of a limit.
Yeah,
I
you can
put
have
a lot
hundreds or
of crap on the
thousands
machine.
of websites on your machine.
You can do wildcards, so technically.
It probably just
And-
slows down the lookups and stuff, but
Yeah.
eventually it's probably just a, you should probably spawn
Probably
another
a
server.
linear progression downward, yeah.
Right.
Do you have a question?
Is that a feature on new versions of Apache server, the previous, the old ones don't use this?
This
has
has
been
been
around for a
with
while.
Apache for at least 10, 15 years.
At least 20,
Yeah, I was
At
gonna
least
say
20.
closer to 20.
at least.
That
Yeah,
you've had the ability to have.
Because I remember playing with that back in 2000.
yeah,
So-
me too.
It's almost been
Yeah.
20 years at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of your, like, unless you're running Lady or something, most web browsers will actually, or web servers will actually have this type of feature. So like if you run Nginx, if you prefer Nginx over Apache, it has this concept.
Even IIS has this, but it's called something different.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very
Virtual
necessary thing.
Virtual
Yeah.
servers, that's it.
So in my version of Apache, I edit the httpd.conf file, and there's a line that says include http extra http-vhost.conf. Uncomment that line. Restart Apache, poof. You're up and running, and it reads that file. Now we need to go configure that file that we just told it to use. So this is the vhost, httpd vhost.conf. I've set up a default website, server name, localhost, document root, where are you going to keep your index.html file or any other web files associated with your default site. Where are you going to log your errors to? I have these two directives in here, dir module and location. And please forgive me, I can't for the life of me remember why I have directory index in there. I think it's because if you go to the address, you'll get a directory listing, and that turns that off. I think that was
No,
what that was
that's
for.
what the
No?
index is. So
Yeah.
like whenever I just go to slash, I'm actually requesting a folder. It's going to tell it, you're going to look for index.html first.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Because in the previous file, in the httpd.conf, it'll have like 4 or 5 different files. It'll be like index.php, index.html,
Right, yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And
Okay.
potentially you could get the wrong one.
Yeah, okay. And then there was some issue I had with permissions, and I remember having to put the require all granted in there. I don't remember why, because this was months ago when I did this.
It might be a 2.4 thing, and the other 2.4 has some weird permissions.
Could, yeah. So then I create my first virtual site, and I call it www.pong.com. And I gave a server alias of pong.com and anything.pong.com. I create my document root and htdocs, www.pong.com. So all my files are going to go in there. What?
Ignore that.
Ignore
That
that.
was me.
Thanks. Change log, error logs, and then those two same sets of parameters I had in the last file. So now if anybody goes to www.pong.com and it would resolve to my IP address, then you would get my default web page, assuming it's built. So, we need to create an index.html file. This is a web page. This is all you need to have a web page. Actually, you need less than this.
It's pretty
But
fancy. Some of my web pages are smaller.
you need an HTML tag, you need a body,
Yeah.
you need to put some text on there to make it useful.
Optional.
Yeah, that's totally optional. I have a hyperlink, hyperreference link, which directs you to this page. And then I close the body and I close the HTML tag. That's it. That's a web page. You're now a
Is
web programmer.
index.html like the initial HTML page?
Say again now? What was the question?
I'm sorry, it was index.html, is that the first thing, default thing?
Yes.
Yes.
your
Yes, if you
program-
go to pong.com, the web server is going to read that file and serve it to the web browser. And then the browser is going to interpret this and display it for you.
And technically, the web server will see you didn't request anything. Go look at that variable to see if it should be index.php or
Yeah,
index.html.
actually by default you request / which is the root of the
Right.
web root, and then it used that, the directory index, and we told it in the config directory index.html, so it went, is there an index.html file here? If so, we'll show that. If not, a lot of times it will by default go to a full directory listing.
If I get on Amazon, they've got a really good book that explains all this, how to like set up your own stuff, right?
Well, actually, if you want to run Apache, the Apache documentation is very good.
Oh,
And there's a W3 Schools website. That's
Yeah, they're
pretty darn good too.
all right.
All right?
And if you start an Apache server and you install the Apache docs program, or if you install like the package from Debian or whatever, you'll have all the documentation on your server.
You're so old school, you like use man pages and stuff, it's like,
I mean,
oh wow, that's hardcore, right?
That's,
All right,
That's how
so
you do it.
that's how you do it.
if you're at home and creating this for yourself, what you need, and you don't have DNS, and the DNS entry configured for your server, so, or for your website, so you want it like mysuperdomain.com, all right? You need to trick your DNS into resolving that to your IP address of your web server so you can test this. And you need to test this.
Because the virtual host expects to see that.
That's right. If you go to your,
IP.
if I just go to my IP address, it's going to give me that default it works page. I need to go to www.pong.com, so it'll give me the virtual site that I want. So I have to trick my DNS, so I create an Etsy hosts file entry that resolves www.pong.com to my actual IP address.
And this works in Windows too. It's just C Windows system and then
System
SE.
32.
System 32.
Yeah, something.
System
Drivers
32.
Etsy hosts.
Ding, ding, ding.
Don't ask me why I remember that.
Because they use Unix stack network.
Because they haven't changed it in that long a time.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
they haven't changed the protocols or anything. So
That's what I'm
there's no
saying,
reason.
it's never
Windows
changed.
3.1, same place.
Yeah.
All right, so test that the default page works with just your IP address, and verify that the website that you created works with your pong.com, and verify that they're two different things. And if you don't get the website that you expect, then look in your log files. And hopefully you didn't make them the same. Hopefully you made them two different log files, one for your default page, one for your websites.
A lot more fun when they're all grouped together though.
No, it's not. Don't listen to him.
As a little bonus bit of homework there, if you're
Yeah.
ever visiting a website and you go to the website and it loads, well, you know that you just got to a vhost, right? If you go to Amazon.com, you went to Amazon.com's vhost on Amazon's IP address. So go get the IP address of the server and type that into your address bar and see what loads.
A lot of times, Google, Amazon, they're gonna probably give you the default page.
Right? They'll
But-
gracefully get you to where you need to go,
Yeah.
but you go to someone's
Some
random
sites.
website, you might get
You've
something
got somebody
completely
that's
different.
like a shared host, yeah, you, a lot of times too, a lot of them will just redirect you to their main page, so like, let's say that I had a web host that had multiple vhosts on a single server, single internet facing IP, what a lot of times it'll do is it'll do that, or it might redirect me to Google.
Right. Google does that. If you hit any IP address that Google owns, just in the browser, they're going to take you right to their main search page.
All right, any questions so far?
Nope.
Sure. All right. All right, so now we have a working website with PHP. Now we're going to move on to MySQL / MariaDB. I got a question earlier about, what's the difference? Well, MySQL was
Licenses.
bought by MySQL was bought by Oracle, so the developers forked it to MariaDB. And so now when you get open source software like Linux and you download MySQL, what you're actually running is MariaDB.
It was a symlink that calls itself MySQL.
Yes, with symlinks.
Aliases.
All the commands that you used to know for MySQL work just fine with MariaDB.
You don't even have to update your scripts.
No, exactly.
It's pretty nice.
But you will occasionally encounter a vendor who's like, sorry, we only support
Yeah.
MySQL. And you're like, but it's you don't know, the only reason you know is because you checked -v.
Yeah.
And they're like, nope. And then you fix it.
Not our problem anymore.
And then you put in an alias that says MySQL-V, returns MySQL.
And then you fix it, and they're like, problem still exists, we'll fix it now. I'm like, yeah, you guys just wanted 2 days to like figure out what the problem is while I made this whole
Exactly.
change.
Duh.
Well, but if they can have you do the work for them, why not?
All right,
It
so
worked great.
you've got MariaDB installed. You've probably never done anything with it. So the first thing you better do is do a MySQL secure installation. This will run through like 5 or 6 or 7 steps.
It's a little wizard.
Yeah, it's a little wizard, just steps you through, yes, change your default password, absolutely,
Definitely do that.
yes.
If
The
you don't do that,
MySQL root password should not equal your system root password. They are 2 different animals, and treat them as such. Don't make them the same.
With the added words of hopefully.
Yeah,
Put a 2 on the end of your root system root password, make that your MySQL password.
yeah. All right, so now for some DB stuff. Log into the MariaDB as the DB root, not as DB-root, but as root. We're going to create a new database. We're going to create a new user. We're going to give the new user that you just created permissions to that new database. Then we're going to exit out of MariaDB as root, log back in as that user, and now you can create your tables. Piece of cake, right? So, from your user prompt, you type MySQL-u root space -p and hit enter. That brings you to, well, after you enter your password for the, for your root password, your DB root password, not system root password. Now you're at a MySQL prompt.
Yeah.
And this is what your MySQL prompt looks like. By convention, in all the MySQL books or database books that you see, the commands that you type are uppercase. Anything user related will be lowercase. Does that make sense? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
All right.
It's actually not case sensitive, but it
It
is
is-
a nice command
right.
for spotting keywords out.
Exactly. You don't have to do it in uppercase, but all the documentation shows it that way, so you know what the key command words are.
So like in C, you don't really have to indent, but
Yeah.
technically not to.
Right. Yes.
Yes, I remember when I was building my server, I don't remember doing that in the command line. It's possible that I have used another thing, a GUI interface called PHP admin or something like that.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
that's a nice little tool.
Yep.
Secure it.
So I log in and I create a database and I call it Pong. Notice there's a semicolon here at the end. That's very important. If you don't put that semicolon, it's going to just bring you to another one of these prompts, expecting you to finish the command.
Neat.
Done.
And then you put the semicolon in, and it goes error.
Yeah.
You're like,
Because there's a return in there.
So then it creates your database. Then you create a user. Put your user in quotes and your host name in quotes.
Should always be asterisk.
What's that?
no.
Should always be an asterisk.
No, it should not be an asterisk. That's a security thing that we were talking about. Don't do that.
Localhost is good if it's only being used by the app. And then other than that, you should actually specify your IP or at least a subnet.
Exactly. And then identified by password. I never understood quite why they say identified by. Maybe it should be secured by. I don't know.
Well, I think it's called back to the old IRC days.
Could be. I don't know.
Yeah, this is-
But identified by. Put your password in the quotes.
Ident was used to log in.
And then grant all on whatever database dot star that says this database and all tables in that database. All right, grant all permissions to all the tables in that database to this particular guy. End it with your semicolon. And then exit.
If you're reading the install guide and it says grant all on and then star, maybe review the install guide more. Maybe figure out what they're not doing. The grant all is actually usually way too permissive for an application.
Oh,
Right.
yes it is, way too permissive.
Way too inclusive.
Way too.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
Give it explicit permissions that it needs for that database and that's it.
And usually the install guide for every
That's
program
true.
will say that.
All right,
If
yeah.
it doesn't, maybe look at it because grant all includes the ability to grant.
So
Yes,
two,
that's a good point.
two things. Localhost versus star, what that means is I can, on a star, I can log into it remotely.
From anywhere.
So if you open the port to MySQL on that server and I can get to it, I could potentially hammer your database and get into it. With localhost, I can't do that. Also,
For that user.
for that user. Also, one thing I found out very recently, that some setups at least, I don't know if it's by the default setup or not, but some setups of MySQL record all of the things that you put into there onto the local file system clear text. And so your password is in there.
Yeah, your command history.
Yes,
Why would they do that?
I don't know.
Command history.
Yeah. I don't remember, it actually does not star out the password or anything. I've actually gotten into databases that I needed to get into for work by looking at the command history and being like, oh, there's the password. Because they didn't put it in our password file, so I'm just like, oh, there it is.
So that
So
password,
keep that in mind.
that password field can be changed to a pre-hashed password.
Right.
And like you said, grant all is way too permissive because that even gives grant permissions, create permissions, create user permissions. It'll also give the user-defined, loading user-defined libraries, which can be extremely dangerous.
So all can be replaced with stuff like read, create, write, delete, and then just Google the whole list. There's like 35 or 40 different
This
things.
actually used to be a really big privilege escalation that you used to be able to take advantage of if they did that. You could actually load a user-defined library in. They would have a function that would call sit shell, and if they had the MySQLD running as root, which used to be a default install method, then that shell would get spawned as root.
Nice. All right, I gotta move on.
Okay.
Well, the program that you install will probably tell you which things it needs on the database.
And if it doesn't, make some decisions for it.
Oh my God,
Click more
I'll have
aggressively.
to go get you some batteries.
fine. All right, log back into MariaDB as your new user. Use the new database, create your tables manually, or install PHP MyAdmin and do it via the GUI.
It's really nice GUI.
It is a nice GUI. What?
Don't put that on your production server.
Don't put that on your production server.
You can't
I
put that on-
agree.
You can put that on your local machine and then connect remotely, but you can't use your local host then. You have to specify the remote host or star.
Yeah.
Or star.
And there is a competitor
I think
to
you can put star.
PHP MyAdmin that's one file, which is kind of nice for portability's sake, so you can quickly delete it.
What's it called?
Yeah.
Webshell.php.
Not webshell.php.
You know what I used to use back in the day is I used to use something that was called SQL YOG. It's a commercial tool, you do have to pay for it, but it was a
like
GUI
that.
desktop application. You would actually have to specify that you can log in remotely to it. I think it also supported doing a login over an SSH tunnel.
All right.
So you
Admin.
could SSH tunnel in, still keep it at localhost.
All right, I gotta keep moving.
Adminer, by the way, is the competitor to it. Adminer.
So after you log in as your newly created user, use POM, which tells you, hey, use this database. All right. So then I go in and I create my tables. Or you can do it via the GUI, and you can right click and you see a new table and tell it what
I like
fields you want and whatever. But, you know, if you're old school and you want to do it, you know, the old-fashioned way, you can create table called players, and you can have fields in here like the ID, your first name, last name, goes by, and email. All right? And then you define those fields as this is an integer, it can't be null, it's the primary key. The first name is a variable character, 20 characters long. Last name, same thing, goes by, same thing. Email, I made it a little bit longer, of 30 characters. Yes?
Why is it important to specify not null?
Because the primary key cannot be null anyways, so.
Primary key of a table cannot be null.
But otherwise, you can actually have it in a database where you can drop a null into a field so there's no data there.
It'll bitch at you if you're.
Null is basically a placeholder for nothing.
It's like 0, right?
So if you have a whole row.
Like it, but it's not.
It's
There's
empty.
no data.
It's
Yeah.
empty.
No, it's nothing.
It's literally telling you there's no data as
It's not-
opposed to just being no data.
It's not dark, it's the absence of light.
But you can't have the primary key null.
Right? You
There
can't have a
has
whole
to
row
be a
of nulls.
value in there.
The whole row
Anything
of
that's
nulls.
primary
Yeah.
key can't be null.
Yeah, so you can have 0 as the primary key.
You
So how
specify
do you
that.
know you have null in like a byte?
It
So
just says
you're
no.
talking two different things. You're talking a null byte versus programming versus this. A null field would just be that, no data. A null in programming would be a 0, an absolute binary 0.
Think Excel. In Excel, on the left-hand side, you got numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all your rows. Those are your primary keys. If you
Right.
get rid of the 5, it just disappears, and then you no longer have a 5.
can't have it empty.
And by the way, PHPMyAdmin, all those commands, when you run a command in there, it will tell you, there's a little slide-up thing, it'll tell you the command to run. So when you're creating a table, go look and see what it actually did. It's kind of neat to learn.
All right, so some thoughts on DBs. A good database requires proper planning. Actually, a functional database requires proper planning. If I could say that 5 more times, I would.
Normalization.
This is a phenomenal book. I learned more reading chapter 1 or 2 than I did in an entire Microsoft MySQL class, or Microsoft SQL class. Just the chapter on DB normalization is well worth it. Read that chapter in this book.
Is that what MSQL stands for, is Microsoft SQL? On the front of it?
No.
I don't know what MSQL is.
It was a version of SQL, you know, at the same time MySQL started back in the 80s.
Yeah.
So each table in your database represents an entity or a thing. And then each column in that table helps describe that thing. You should not have duplicate entries in 2 different tables. The book describes, goes through normalizing a database around a guy who wants to inventory his CD collection. And he starts by creating these tables of, well, this is this album, and this album has these songs on it. And I have another album that has these songs on it. Well, then what happens if you
You
have
got
the
that
same
mixtape
song on
album.
2 different same song on 2 different albums? Now you got duplicate entries in 2 different tables.
Instead, create a song table and reference the song ID.
So there's ways about getting around that, and that's called DB normalization. So that you only have one key or one set of values in every table.
Use a table to describe an object,
Yeah. So
and then reference the object in other tables that link things.
so that's why I highly recommend reading that chapter on normalization.
Very good point. This is the difference between a good database and a bad database.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have 2 tables in my database. One is players, and from the SQL prompt, if you type describe space table name, I didn't put that in caps, sorry, sue me. Describe players, it will describe the player tables. Describe the players table, there we go. And it's got the 4 fields that I showed, or 5 fields, the ID, it's the primary key, and it auto increments. It's got first name, last name, who they go by, and their email address. That's the table. And then you can have an infinite number of values within those rows, or within those columns.
I like that null is no, but the default is null.
Yes, but it won't spawn because we've got auto increment,
Right.
so it wouldn't be
This is,
possible.
this table has no data in it yet. What you're looking at is no data.
Also, the default is by default null for data field, so.
Null is no, it can't be null.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Key is a primary.
And default is null.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
But auto increment would take care of that.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. I think it overrides that.
And actually, believe it or not, if you tried to inject a null intentionally, it will actually throw a hissy fit and die. It'll error out saying that this is a no null field, so.
My next table is scores, and this keeps track of, you know, our scores. All right, how many points everybody got for that specific date. So we have a tournament every Tuesday, and this keeps track of who got how many points for that night. So we have the date field, the player ID, how many points they got, and what place they came in. So I can go back in later and query the database saying, hey, how many times did this guy get first place? How many points does this guy get? What's his average points per game over the last year? I can do that with this simple little database of 2 tables. What I can't do is, how well did this guy do against this guy? I can't do that. But I know a guy, his name is Mickey Singh. He runs, he's a database guru for the USTA, United States Tennis Association. And he's got his own database, and they call him up and say, hey, what's the number of times this guy's beat this guy on this court? And he Googles it on his home computer. It gives him the data. Yes?
Might be silly, but the place,
Yeah.
can't you just do like by, select all by date and look at it's like this number 1, number 2, number 3, or whatever.
All right, say that again.
Select all by today's date and then order by score, and then you can find out what place they were in.
I think the thing is, you gotta remember it's a tournament, and the points is the amount of points needed to win, right?
No, this is points that you get, so first place gets so many points, second place gets so many points.
Oh, okay,
third
so
place
then,
gets so
yeah,
many
you
points.
probably actually could do it, he said.
So, but it depends. The way the tournament director runs it is everybody gets like 10 points for showing up. And then if they win their next game, they get,
Just like real life.
yeah. You get
Participation points.
20
Yay.
points in the winner's bracket, and then 40 points for the next one, and 60 or 80 for the next one, and then, but if you go to the loser's bracket, you only get 10 points each time you advance. So it's a little complicated.
Okay.
Alright. So there's, so player, so I was mentioning how you link, Travis was mentioning how you link tables, data and tables from one to another without duplicating data. So I have a player ID, well actually the players table has a field called ID, and the scores has a player ID. These are the same, well, they're not the same thing, but they represent the same thing. All right, so I want to select, this user from this table and all of the points that he got from this table. Well, I reference that by his number, his player ID. And that's how you have to do it. I'll show an example of that in a minute, on how we
Are
query
you gonna
that.
relate the tables or join them?
Relate, I think.
No, I was just,
I
sorry.
think, that's a good question. All right, so I'm gonna move on. In order to, now we need to start talking about getting PHP to talk to your database. So I create a PHP credentials file, PHP creds. And in there I put in my server name, username, password, database name. And then you put this file somewhere where PHP can read it, but, you know, hopefully nobody else can. You're the administrator, it's up to you where you put it. Where do you recommend putting it securely?
Not in www.
Not in the
Not, yeah, exactly. So, you can.
Also change the ownership too.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think Apache has to be able to read it, so
Yeah.
if you're using like SE Linux or something, you need to make sure to set the permissions on SE Linux properly so Apache can read it.
Yeah. After you create the creds file, then I create a connection file. And in that connection file, I include creds.php, create your connection, which is this server string, MySQL connect, and it connects to the MySQL server. Check your connection. If the connection's not
Connected. Or if not connected.
If not connected,
It'll
display
say
that error message.
Mhm.
If you
And
connect,
die.
no news is
Ends the
good
script.
news. All right? This statement in itself does absolutely nothing other than assign this string of characters to that. It doesn't actually do anything until it gets here.
It will actually connect. What you're doing is you're checking the object and seeing if it's not a valid object, and if it's not a valid object, then you die. That meant that the SQL failed to connect. So it will return an SQL object. It'll return a SQL database object, or it will return nothing. And if it returns nothing, then whenever you say not nothing, you're double negatives, which becomes true, which leads you into that.
All right.
So you do actually connect to that one, but you're connected. You're not doing anything yet, but you do have a connection established. And that's why if that failed, you're going to throw the error that says connection failed.
All right. So test your PHP files, the ones you just created, your connection and your creds. All right. And I do a PHP space con.php, and no news is good news. All right. If you get nothing back, it worked. If it failed, it would have printed connection failed. And hopefully it didn't do that. So, all right, so we've got Apache working, we've got PHP working, we've got Apache working with PHP, and now we've got PHP talking to the SQL server. All right,
That's a lamp stack.
that's a lamp stack. Last hurdle. Create your HTML forms. We got to get, the whole purpose of this is to input data via HTML to update the database. Or get Apache
query it.
to query the database to get the data back out of it.
Looking for dynamic content.
Exactly. Dynamic content, that's what the whole world's about, right? Well, that's a crappy picture.
It's just a little pixelated.
White flooded.
Brains.
Yeah, we can read it.
Resolution changes, they work well.
Yeah.
They do. I don't want to mess with that though.
Yeah, we can read it alright.
So anyway, this is one of my pages called roster.php, and it prints out the roster of everybody that's played so far. I haven't updated this in a while, so give me a break. It's got Randall, it's got Rick Yeager, Rick Vogt, and myself. And then it has, are there any new names to add? And you can type in first name, last name, what they go by, email address, and there's a button that says add the player. Are there any players to remove? You put in goes by, and then there's a button saying delete player. Pretty simple, right?
This goes by your key value?
Goes by is a unique name in that table.
Oh, it's
Yes.
unique, okay.
Is that like the Rick J and Rick D?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's the, yep. So we got two Ricks, Rick J and Rick V, and so,
So it's their first name, last name, and then their goes by.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
For me, goes by is Rob.
There can be only one.
Yeah, and any other Rob is Rob plus their last initial or whatever. But I'm the Rob. So this is what roster.php looks like. I include my connection. I make my SQL statement, which is select, first name, last name goes by, those three fields. from the table players, order by, goes by. So it's going to select those three fields and then it's going to spit them out in the order of alphabetical order by their goes by name. It's going to run that SQL command and then it's going to output them in that format. If there's any black magic here, it's this loop. Trying to explain exactly how that loop works is more than what I want to deal with right now.
Okay.
If you would like to go for it, go for
Sure.
it. All right.
The first one is the if statement, where we check the number of rows on the results that we got back from the query. We're checking to see if it's greater than 0. Otherwise, we're just going to echo out that else statement there, so the echo 0 results. Otherwise, we enter this loop, which becomes a while loop, where we're saying for each row that's in this results that we got, it'll get each row and just iterate through each row that we've got, and then we're extracting them by row, and then you're doing those square brackets and then the name of the field. So as we saw in his table, he's got first underscore name, last underscore name, and goes underscore by, doing that. And then he's kind of concatenating all this together in an echo statement. So we've got that. You know, in a lot of languages, it's a plus sign to concatenate strings, but in MySQL or PHP, it's period for some reason. But we're doing first name, period, space, period, last name, concatenate it with a space, concatenate with goes by, and then finally the BR tag, which is your HTML tag for saying a new line. And that's the double magic, and then at the end we close our MySQL connection.
Oh, nice.
So this does the SQL connect, or does the query,
The query,
and
yeah.
this formats it for you in the way that.
Yeah, it's a presentation.
Yeah.
So we've got our data from the database, and then we just
And we lay it out.
massage it for the presentation.
And then this is the rest of the file. And there's a form which has an action. When you submit this data, it's going to go to addPlayer.php with a post command, which says post this data to that page. I want to have those fields at first name, last name, goes by, email address. These are just the text fields that you're typing stuff into. And then there's the button that says Add Player. Are there any players to remove? Once again, there's the field that you type it into, and then there's a Submit button that says Delete Player. And there was a...
Ooh, that was interesting.
What's that?
One form.
You did that all with one form, and you changed the action on the button to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
So it's technically legal.
Yes.
Very
It
confusing
posts
way to
it
do
to, you can post it to do 2 different PHP files. One
In one form, yes.
in one form, yes.
Still gets where it needs to go.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll either take you
That's
to...
really interesting though. Okay, never mind, I see the difference.
Okay.
Goes by, and then goes by with an underscore and without.
All
So I
right,
was curious about the name field.
okay.
But yeah, that would actually be legal.
Mhm. Did I break it?
There we go.
All right. So then we go to the add player, assuming that we were going to add a player to our database. And at the top, it receives those 4 things that we just put in from the other page. And it receives them as first name, last name, goes by an email. And it receives them, from your posts from the other page. Then we connect to the database. And we're going to insert into the players table those fields, that data that we just said. I'm sorry. We're going to insert into the players table, into these fields in that table, these values. Clear as mud?
Could you replace the values with the post
You could.
statements?
He's just grabbing those and putting them into variables, but yes, you could. But it results in a very long and kind of convoluted line.
Yeah, I'm just curious about how.
Also,
Stakeholder.
from a security standpoint, you shouldn't do it that way. That's vulnerable to an SQL injection.
Should
That's what
not do
I'm
it this
asking
way, or?
about injections.
Do what?
You should not do it this way?
Yes,
Or what
because
do you
what
say?
you're doing is you're concatenating variables into a string. That would be vulnerable to an SQL injection. You should be using PDOs, prepared data objects,
All right,
instead. But that right there is vulnerable to an SQL injection.
see, good to know.
And if you're gonna do a string, I would not use PHP, I would use Python at that point because it's more designed for it. And SQL kind of likes Python for stringing more so, or at least in my.
All right,
So what he's saying by SQL injection is you could take the email field and you could put into the email box of the website the end quote,
Single tick,
the,
and then
the
whatever
end.
I want to add.
Right.
Drop tables all.
Now, that's an interesting thing about the MySQL interface for PHP, is it actually only supports one command per line. So you can't, semi-quote and
Okay.
then drop table. You would actually have to be doing something directly with this, but you can do a lot of something interesting here. Like, I could actually have it join another table and insert that into this table so I can read the other data, but
all right, I gotta move on.
yeah, sure.
All right, so anyway, this is how I did it. Maybe vulnerable, but
It gets the job done, or just talking ping pong ball.
yeah, exactly. 21, so never mind.
Just don't do it at Bank of America.
And don't do it, don't do it in any financial institution. So understanding some MySQL commands. Get data from a table, all right, select whatever field you want to select from whatever table you want to pull from, where whatever field you're looking for equals whatever value you want to pull from. If you want to get data from multiple tables, select, goes by, and the sum of the points. So this will automatically sum the points for you as total from players and scores, where player ID equals scores ID. So that will get you, all the sum of the points for, user Rob. Oh yeah, all right, starting to run out of steam, sorry.
And not applicable in this situation, but if you run a popular website, this is where you start to see query times get big, as it has to traverse multiple tables to get its work done. So
Yeah.
when you start to get scaled really big, you start to get creative with your commands because they can run for a while.
Yep.
And that's
Then if you want to sort that output, it's almost identical, except you add another layer of complexity to it. Select goes by and sum of points as total from players, where players and scores, where player ID equals scores. Group by goes by and order by total. Piece of cake.
Descending order.
In descending order, yep. I should have an example of that somewhere. And then some higher level DB commands. Show databases as DB root will show you all the databases in your SQL server. It'll just list them out. Use DB tells you what database to use. Show tables will list the tables that you have in your database. And describe, as you saw earlier, describes a specific table, what fields are in those tables. I think I went over this guy already,
We
inserting
have
data into
PHP.
tables.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's why I ran out of steam. That's all, folks. Any questions?
Is there a tequila shot calling your name?
There is. I hear it.
Thank you very much.